The crimson warning beacon pulsed across every inhabited system in the galaxy, its message burning through subspace with unprecedented clarity. From the ice worlds of the outer rim to the crystalline cities of the core sectors, every species received the same transmission simultaneously. A feat of communication that should have been impossible for any single civilization. Admiral Vexithara of the hegemony command ship Dominion's Edge stared at the holographic display with 3 of her 6 eyes, while the others tracked the tactical readouts streaming across her command center. The human transmission played on repeat, the alien voice calm, yet carrying an undertone that made her chitinous exoskeleton shiver involuntarily. This is the final message from the Terran Defense Coalition to all species within the Milky Way. Galaxy, we have endured 17 separate invasion attempts over the past 2 centuries. We have repelled each with increasing efficiency. We have captured your technologies, studied your biology, and learned your weaknesses. We have shown restraint where others would have shown revenge. The message paused, and Vexithara noticed her bridge crew had gone completely silent, a rare occurrence among her typically chattering species. One more attack on human space will result in the complete annihilation of the aggressing species. This is not a threat. This is a promise backed by capabilities you cannot comprehend. You have been warned. The transmission ended, leaving only the soft hum of the ship's systems. Vexthara's communications officer, a nervous Skithari named Quilktor, cleared his throat equivalent. Admiral, we're receiving similar reports from across the galaxy. Every species received this message simultaneously, regardless of their location or communication infrastructure. Impossible! Growled War Commander Dreknos from his position at the tactical station. His massive frame dwarfed the console as his 4 arms worked frantically across the displays. No single species possesses the technology for galaxy-wide instantaneous communication. The humans barely achieved faster-than-light travel 300 years ago. Vexthara wasn't so certain. The hegemony had been among the first to test these humans when they'd emerged from their little blue world, expecting another primitive species ripe for conquest or subjugation. Instead, they'd encountered something unprecedented, a species that adapted to each attack, learning and evolving their defenses with terrifying speed. The first assault had been launched by the Kretang Dominion, expecting easy pickings from the newly spacefaring humans. They'd returned with tales of weapons that turned their own technology against them, of human ships that seemed to predict their every move. The second attack, mounted by the Vrex Collective, had ended with their entire invasion force simply disappearing. No wreckage, no distress signals, nothing. Sir, Quilktor's voice cracked with worry. We're detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Structures that weren't there during our last reconnaissance sweep 6 months ago. The main display shifted to show the human star system they'd been monitoring. Where once there had been simple orbital platforms and modest defensive stations, now massive constructs dotted the system, geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Directly, their surfaces seeming to bend light in impossible ways. By the ancient codes, whispered Navigator Zesinda from her position at the Stellar Cartography Station. Those readings, they're not just ships or stations. They're something else entirely. Vexthara felt a chill run through her compound nervous system. In her 2 centuries of military service, she'd conquered 47 worlds and subjugated dozens of species. She'd never encountered anything that made her instinctively want to retreat without even engaging. The humans had been quiet for 50 years since the last failed invasion attempt, and everyone had assumed they'd simply accepted their place as a minor galactic power. They'd been very, very wrong. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Conclave had never hosted such a gathering. Representatives from over 3,000 species filled the vast amphitheater, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex web of environmental barriers and life support bubbles. The emergency session had been called within hours of receiving the human transmission, and the fear was palpable across every delegation. Hierarch Mulvrak of the Elder Council rose from the central dais, his ancient form commanding attention despite his species' natural frailty. His voice, artificially amplified through psionic enhancers, reached every corner of the assembly. "We convene in unprecedented circumstances," he began, his words translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. "For the first time in galactic history, a single species has issued a threat of complete annihilation to our entire collective." Murmurs rippled through the assembly, ranging from indignant clicks to worried harmonics. Chancellor Rix Vera of the Mektai Federation stood, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in prismatic patterns. "Hierarch, with respect, threats are common in galactic politics. What makes this different?" "Because it's not a threat," interrupted Admiral Nexorim of the Stellar Armada, his gravelly voice cutting through the diplomatic niceties. "Our intelligence networks have been tracking human development since their emergence. They've never made empty boasts. Every promise they've made regarding defense has been delivered with surgical precision." The assembly erupted in chaotic debate until High Justiciar Kilana activated the harmony dampeners, forcing a tense quiet. Her ethereal form floated above the crowd as she spoke. "The humans have requested audience with this body. Their representative awaits outside." A collective intake of breath, or equivalent, swept through the chamber. No species had ever requested to address the full conclave. Most were too intimidated by the combined presence of galactic civilization's eldest and most powerful races. "Send them in," Mulvrak decided after a moment's consideration. The figure that entered the chamber was unremarkable by galactic standards. Bipedal, average height, no obvious natural weapons or defenses. Ambassador Rincastle walked calmly to the speaker's podium, her simple dark clothing a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the assembled delegates. She spoke without preamble, her voice clear and unamplified, yet somehow audible throughout the vast space. "Honored representatives, I come not to negotiate, but to clarify. The message my people transmitted was neither diplomacy nor bluster. It was a statement of fact." Executor Valmoth of the Hegemony leaned forward, his multiple voice boxes creating an intimidating harmony. "Ambassador, your species numbers perhaps 10 billion across a handful of worlds. This assembly represents civilizations with populations in the trillions, fleets that could blot out your sun. What possible capability could you possess to threaten us?" Rincastle smiled, an expression that somehow made several delegates shift uncomfortably. 200 years ago, when the first invasion force arrived at our borders, we were indeed as weak as you suggest. But you taught us something valuable, that in this galaxy only strength ensures survival." She touched a device on her wrist, and the chamber's displays activated, showing tactical readings that made military advisors throughout the audience go rigid with shock. These are real-time scans of human space, transmitted through quantum-entangled beacons we've placed throughout the galaxy over the past 50 years. The displays showed weapon signatures that defied conventional understanding, energy readings that suggested planet-killing capabilities multiplied by factors that couldn't be accurate. Massive structures moved through human space that registered as having the mass of small moons, but the power output of stellar cores. "Impossible," breathed Defense Coordinator Yixtal. "No species could construct such weapons without destabilizing local space-time." "You're correct," Rincastle acknowledged. "No single species could. But we learned from every attack. We studied every technology brought against us. We improved upon designs that your own civilizations considered perfected millennia ago. What you're seeing is the result of concentrated human innovation applied to 2 centuries of involuntary education." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Hierarch Mulvrak found his voice. "What do you want, Ambassador?" "Nothing," she replied simply. "We want to be left alone to develop in peace. But if that peace is broken again, the consequences will be absolute. Choose wisely." 3 weeks after Ambassador Rincastle's address, to the Galactic Conclave, the Vrex Consortium made their decision. War Marshal KlaxVan stood aboard the bridge of the super dreadnought Inevitable Conquest, watching the final preparations for what his species called a probe attack, a limited engagement designed to test human defensive capabilities without fully committing to invasion. "Surely they cannot mean complete annihilation," he muttered to his chief tactical officer, Battle Commander Corix. "No species possesses such capability. It would require energy outputs equivalent to stellar engineering. Corix's sensor stalks twitched nervously as he monitored the approach vectors. "War Marshal, our deep scouts report unusual activity throughout human space. Mass movements of those structures they've been building." The Virex task force consisted of 50 heavy cruisers and 300 escort vessels, a respectable force that could subjugate most civilizations. Their plan was elegant in its simplicity: strike fast at a remote human colony, demonstrate galactic superiority, then withdraw before facing significant resistance. The humans would understand their place, and the consortium would gain valuable intelligence about their defensive capabilities. As they approached the edge of human-controlled space, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. "Contact," Corix announced. "Single vessel approaching on intercept course." On the main display, a ship materialized that defied conventional design principles. It appeared to be constructed from materials that absorbed and reflected light, simultaneously creating an unsettling visual paradox. More disturbing were the energy readings. The vessel, barely a tenth the size of their flagship, registered power levels that matched their entire fleet. "Open communications," KlaxVan ordered, his confidence wavering slightly. The face that appeared on screen was human, male, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that held depths of exhaustion. "I am Fleet Captain Grimshore of the Terran Defense Force. You are Admiral KlaxVan of the Vrex Consortium, commanding a force of 353 vessels with clear aggressive intent toward human territory." KlaxVan's primary hearts skipped several beats. The human had identified not only him personally, but the exact composition of his fleet, information that should have been impossible to obtain. "We are conducting standard patrol operations in neutral space," he replied carefully. Grimshore's expression didn't change. "Admiral, your fleet's configuration, ammunition loadouts, and target vectors indicate an assault force prepared for planetary bombardment. You have 17 minutes to reverse course before we implement the promise made to your conclave." "You threaten our entire fleet with a single ship?" KlaxVan's confusion gave way to anger. "We outnumber you 300 to 1. "Admiral," Grimshore's voice carried a weight that made the Vrex commander's exoskeleton crawl. "Numbers stopped mattering the moment your species chose to test our resolve. You now have 15 minutes to withdraw. This is your final warning." The Farma transmission ended, leaving the Vrex bridge in stunned silence. Battle Commander Corix checked his instruments frantically. "War Marshal, their single vessel is beginning some kind of charging sequence. Energy readings are... This can't be correct." "What are you seeing?" KlaxVan demanded. "Sir, it's drawing power directly from local space-time. The energy patterns match theoretical descriptions of controlled stellar collapse, but on a localized scale. If these readings are accurate, that ship could annihilate our entire fleet and still have power reserves equivalent to a small star." KlaxVan stared at the impossible vessel on his display. Every instinct honed through decades of successful conquest screamed at him to attack, to show these upstart humans the price of threatening the Vrex Consortium. But another part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through countless battles, whispered warnings about predators who appeared weak but struck with devastating force. "All ships," he finally commanded, his voice heavy with reluctant wisdom. "Reverse course. Set heading for Consortium space, maximum velocity." As the Vrex fleet retreated, Grimshore watched from his command chair with grim satisfaction. His ship, the final warning, was indeed capable of everything the Vrex instruments had detected. But it was only one of 1,200 identical vessels now deployed throughout human space, each one a monument to 2 centuries of forced adaptation and relentless innovation. The test was over. Humanity's message had been delivered clearly. Now they waited to see who would be foolish enough to test them again. 6 months passed in relative galactic peace before the Kethmori Empire decided that human warnings were mere bluster designed to intimidate lesser species. Supreme War Leader Vaskarator had built his reputation on crushing civilizations that others deemed too dangerous to engage, and he saw the human situation as the ultimate opportunity to cement his legacy. Unlike the half-hearted probe attempted by the Vrex Consortium, the Kethmori assembled a proper invasion force, 2,000 capital ships, 50,000 support vessels, and a mobile war station the size of a small moon. Their target was Earth itself, the human homeworld, and the symbolic heart of their growing defiance. They will learn the price of threatening their betters, Vaskarator declared from the command throne of the war station Eternal Dominion. His cybernetic enhancements gleamed as he surveyed tactical displays showing the largest military force assembled in galactic history. "We shall make an example that will echo across the stars for millennia," his chief intelligence officer, Spy Master Rylnix, approached the throne with obvious reluctance. "Supreme War Leader, our deep reconnaissance indicates the humans have been preparing. The defensive structures around their core worlds have multiplied exponentially since the Vrex incident." "Structures can be destroyed," Vaskarator replied, dismissively. "Numbers ultimately determine victory, and we outnumber them 10,000 to 1. What Vaskarator didn't know was that every move of his vast armada had been tracked from the moment it departed Kethmori space. Deep within the Sol system, humanity's true response was awakening. Admiral Zaraneth stood in the command center of humanity's most classified installation, a facility that officially didn't exist, buried within the core of Luna itself. Around her, the greatest minds humanity had produced over 2 centuries worked at stations that seemed to bend reality around them, their surfaces displaying equations that hurt to look at directly. "Admiral," reported Chief Researcher Corvallis, his voice tight with barely controlled power, "the Kethmori fleet will reach the outer system in 14 hours. They're maintaining attack formation and have ignored all withdrawal warnings." Zaraneth nodded grimly. She had hoped it wouldn't come to this. The weapons humanity had developed were not merely tools of war. They were instruments of absolute annihilation that would demonstrate to the galaxy exactly how far human innovation had progressed when driven by survival necessity. "Initialize the extinction protocol," she commanded. "Authorization code, final solution 007. Throughout human space, structures that had been mistaken for defense platforms revealed their true purpose. They weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were tiers in reality itself, carefully controlled rifts that connected to the spaces between dimensions where the fundamental forces of creation and destruction danced in eternal balance. The Kethmori invasion force detected the energy surge when they were still 3 light hours from Earth. Supreme War Leader Vaskarator studied the readings with growing unease as his sensors registered impossible energy signatures cascading throughout the system. "Sir," his tactical officer announced, voice cracking with disbelief, "we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies forming throughout human space. The readings suggest controlled black hole formation." "Impossible," Vaskarator snarled. "No species possesses such technology." But as they watched, points of absolute darkness began materializing around their fleet. Not the natural darkness of space, but true voids that devoured light itself. The human response wasn't kinetic weapons or energy beams. It was the weaponization of entropy itself. "All ships, emergency scatter," Vaskarator commanded, but it was already too late. The first wave of gravitational weapons didn't destroy the Kethmori vessels. They simply erased them from existence, folding space-time around. The ships until they occupied the same dimensional coordinates as nothing at all. Entire squadrons vanished without explosions, without debris, without any trace they had ever existed. In 17 minutes, an invasion force that had taken 3 years to assemble was reduced to scattered energy signatures and quantum echoes. The war station Eternal Dominion, pride of the Kethmori Empire, lasted longest, its massive bulk and advanced shielding systems giving it precious seconds to broadcast a final transmission before it too was consumed by weaponized void. They're not warriors, Vascrator's final message reached Kethmori space 3 hours later. They're something else entirely, something that treats the laws of physics as mere suggestions. The transmission ended in quantum static. Within hours, the news spread throughout the galaxy. The Kethmori Empire, one of the 3 most powerful military forces in known space, had sent their greatest armada against humanity and received only silence in return. The message was unmistakable. Humanity's warning had not been empty boasting. The HFY obliteration of the Kethmori invasion force sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization that went far beyond mere military concerns. Within the deepest archives of the elder races, scholars and historians began frantically searching through records that hadn't been accessed in millennia, looking for any reference to weapons that could erase matter from existence itself. Archive Keeper. Sil Warden of the Ancient Collective stood before the quantum memory core that housed the collected knowledge of civilizations that had risen and fallen before most current species had achieved sentience. Her crystalline form flickered with agitation as she processed data streams that should have remained buried forever. "By the first makers," she whispered, her harmonic voice creating resonant frequencies of fear. "The patterns match. The energy, signatures, the dimensional distortions, the complete erasure without trace. It matches the theoretical descriptions from the predecessor archives." Her assistant, a young scholar named Ethmiran, floated closer to examine the ancient data. "Archive Keeper. Those records describe technologies that were deemed impossible, weapons that could unweave the fabric of reality itself. The predecessors supposedly destroyed themselves experimenting with such forces." "Not destroyed," Sil Warden corrected, her form pulsing with growing horror. "Transcended beyond the need for physical existence. But they left warnings, detailed warnings about what happens when species develop reality manipulation technology without proper philosophical preparation." Meanwhile, in human space, the aftermath of the Battle of Sol was revealing truths that even humanity's leadership found disturbing. Dr. Lyranex stood in the secure laboratory aboard the research station Deep Thought, studying quantum resonance patterns that lingered where the Kethmori fleet had been erased. "The weapons worked exactly as designed," she reported to the assembled Terran Defense Council via encrypted quantum link. "But the side effects are concerning. We've created stable micro-rifts in local space-time. The dimensional barriers in this region have been permanently weakened." Council leader Miravex leaned forward, her expression grave. "Explain the implications, Doctor." "We're not just defending ourselves anymore," Lyranex admitted. "Every time we use these weapons, we're bringing our reality closer to dimensions
that operate under completely different physical laws. The more we fight, the more we risk fundamentally altering the nature of existence in our local galactic region. Unknown to both species, deep in the galactic core, something ancient was
stirring. The gardeners, being so old that they remembered the formation of the galaxy itself, had maintained their vigil over younger species for eons, intervening only when civilizations developed technologies that threatened the stability of reality. Itself, entity designation, harmony of spheres, communicated with its companions through means that transcended language or thought. The young species on the outer rim has achieved dimensional manipulation capabilities. The resonance patterns match the theoretical frameworks we established after the last reality cascade. Whisper of Stars responded with concepts that conveyed deep concern. "Their weapons are elegant, but dangerous," They are approaching the threshold where local space-time could become unstable. We may need to make contact. The first direct intervention in 12 million years, Echo of Time observed. Are we certain they pose such a threat? In response, Harmony of Spheres projected the quantum echoes from humanity's recent defensive actions. The dimensional tiers were small but growing, each use of their weapons creating cumulative weakening in the barriers between realities. They are not malicious, Whisper of Stars concluded. They are afraid. Fear-driven innovation often produces the most dangerous breakthroughs. They have achieved in centuries what typically takes species millions of years to develop, and they lack the wisdom to understand the consequences. Back in inhabited space, the galactic response to humanity's demonstration was swift and unprecedented. Every major species simultaneously recalled their military forces to defensive positions around their homeworlds. Trade routes were rerouted to avoid human space entirely. A quarantine zone was established with humanity at its center, not to contain them, but to avoid provoking them further. But one species was preparing for a different response. The hive mind of Nexthraki, a collective intelligence spanning billions of individual organisms, had reached a conclusion that their individual components found disturbing. The humans represented an existential threat not just to individual species, but to the fundamental stability of reality itself. Primary Node Collective 7749 communicated with its hierarchy through direct neural interface. Analysis complete. Human weapons utilize principles that could cascade beyond their local space-time region. Probability of galactic-scale dimensional collapse, 12.7% and rising with each deployment. Recommendation, queried the higher node. Assembly. Complete sterilization of human space using quantum annihilation protocols. The risk of leaving them unchecked exceeds the moral implications of genocidal action. The hive mind began mobilizing forces that dwarfed even the Kethamori. Armada, not for conquest, but for what they calculated as necessary extinction to preserve galactic reality itself. They would learn too late that humanity had been monitoring their communications for decades, and that their planned mercy killing had just triggered humanity's most extreme defensive protocols. The Nexthraki hive mind's vast armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory, like a plague of metallic locusts. 5,000 capital ships, each one a living fusion of technology and biology, accompanied by swarms of fighter organisms that numbered in the millions. Unlike previous invasion attempts, this wasn't conquest, it was calculated extinction. Primary Node Collective 7749 broadcast on all frequencies as the fleet approached. Attention, human entities. Your technological development threatens dimensional stability. We implement mercy protocols for the preservation of galactic reality. Surrender will result in swift termination. Resistance will necessitate prolonged suffering before inevitable annihilation. The response from humanity was not words, but action that defied everything the hive mind thought it understood about the limits of physics. Admiral Kexander stood in the command center of humanity's most secret installation, a facility that existed partially outside normal space-time, its very structure an achievement that would have been impossible without 2 centuries of forced technological evolution. Around her, reality itself seemed malleable, with surfaces that showed not instrument readings, but direct observations of the quantum foam underlying existence. "Sir," reported her chief science officer, Dr. Renshaw, "the Nexthraki fleet is larger than our previous estimates. Their bioships are showing adaptation patterns in real time. They're evolving defenses against our known weapons while they approach. Then it's time they learned what we've really been building," Kexander replied grimly. She activated communication systems that reached not just human forces, but deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. When she spoke, her words would be heard by every intelligence-gathering service in known space. "This is Admiral Kexander of the Terran Reality Defense Corps. To all galactic observers, witness what happens when humanity is pushed beyond the point of restraint." The next Thraki collective has declared their intent to exterminate our species based on their calculation that we pose a dimensional threat. They are correct about the threat. They are wrong about its scope. Throughout human space, structures that dwarfed planets began to reveal their true purpose. What external observers had assumed were defensive installations were actually components of a single system-spanning mechanism, a device that turned the fundamental forces of reality into tools of war. The ancient gardeners, monitoring from their realm at the galactic core, experienced something analogous to panic for the first time in millions of years. Harmony of spheres transmitted urgently to its companions. The humans have constructed a reality anchor system. They're not just manipulating local space-time, they're preparing to rewrite the fundamental constants of physics in a localized region. Echo of Time responded with concepts tinged with awe and terror. Impossible. Such technology would require understanding of the base code underlying existence itself. They would need to comprehend the architecture of creation. They learned it from their attackers, Whisper of Stars realized. Each invasion brought new technologies, new perspectives on the nature of reality. They've been using their enemies as unwitting teachers, building toward this moment. As the next Thraki fleet closed to weapons range, humanity's response began. It started as a subtle alteration in the local gravitational constant, not enough to affect biological functions, but sufficient to make the bioship's organic components begin failing in microscopic ways. Primary Node Collective 7749 registered. The effect immediately. Alert. Environmental parameters shifting. Gravity, electromagnetic constants, strong nuclear force all showing variation beyond normal fluctuation ranges. But the changes were just beginning. Humanity had learned that reality itself was programmable, and they had spent 50 years writing code that would make their local region of space uniquely hostile to any species not specifically adapted to their modifications. The speed of light began increasing in small increments, causing the next Thraki ship's energy systems to overload as photons carried more energy than their biology could process. The strong nuclear force weakened slightly, causing the heavier elements in their technology to become unstable. Most subtle of all, the quantum uncertainty principle itself began favoring outcomes that supported human defensive systems while introducing chaos into enemy-targeting computers. This is impossible, Collective 7749 broadcast desperately as its fleet began experiencing systematic failures that seemed to violate causality itself. Physical constants cannot be altered. Admiral Kexander's response echoed across subspace. Physical constants are merely variables in equations we've learned to rewrite. You came here to preserve galactic reality from human interference. You failed to understand that we are reality now, at least in our local region of space. Welcome to humanity's neighborhood, where the laws of physics answer to us. The next Thraki fleet didn't explode or dissolve. It simply stopped functioning as the underlying rules governing its existence were rewritten. Bioships designed for perfect efficiency found themselves operating in a universe where their biological processes were no longer optimized. Their collective intelligence, dependent on quantum entanglement across vast distances, discovered that quantum mechanics itself now worked differently in human space. Within hours, the greatest military force ever assembled for the purpose of extinction was reduced to a collection of confused organisms floating helplessly in space, their technology inoperative and their hive mind fragmented by alterations to the quantum substrate that enabled their consciousness. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated that they had transcended the limitations that bound every other known species. They hadn't just developed better weapons, they had made themselves the arbiters of how reality functioned in their domain. In the aftermath of humanity's reality manipulation demonstration, the galaxy entered a period of profound transformation. The Galactic Conclave convened emergency sessions not to plan military responses, but to fundamentally reconsider the nature of existence itself. Hierarch Molvrak stood before the assembled representatives, his ancient form seeming even more fragile in the wake of recent revelations. Honored delegates, We must acknowledge a truth that challenges everything we thought we understood about the cosmos. The humans have not merely become powerful, they have become something fundamentally different from the rest of us. The emergency. Session was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. Ambassador Rincastle entered the chamber, accompanied by three figures that caused immediate consternation among the assembled delegates. These weren't humans, as the galaxy had come to recognize. Their forms seemed to exist in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously solid and translucent, present and absent. "I present the Emergent Council," Rincastle announced, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been present in her previous appearances. "Humans who have chosen to transition beyond purely physical existence to better understand and control the reality manipulation technologies we've developed." The lead figure, who identified herself as Transcendent Dexaria, spoke with a voice that seemed to come from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We come not as conquerors, but as gardeners of possibility. Our species has learned that great power requires even greater responsibility." High Justiciar Kailana floated forward, her ethereal form trembling. "What do you want from us? What is humanity's price for not rewriting reality across the galaxy?" "We want what we have always wanted," Dexaria replied. "To be left alone to develop in peace, but circumstances have made isolation impossible. Our defensive technologies have effects that ripple beyond our intended scope. We must therefore take active responsibility for maintaining cosmic stability." From the depths of space, the ancient gardeners finally broke their millions of years of silence. Harmony of spheres materialized in the chamber, not physically, but as a presence that every being could perceive regardless of their sensory modalities. "Young species," the entity communicated in concepts that transcended language. "You have achieved in centuries what we accomplished over eons. Your development has been unusual. Most civilizations that reach your level of reality manipulation do so gradually, with time to develop philosophical frameworks for their capabilities. You were forced to innovate under threat of extinction." Transcendent Dexaria turned to address the ancient being directly. "We are aware of our rapid development. We have been observing your species since we first detected dimensional disturbances. You are the predecessors mentioned in the oldest archives, the ones who taught reality to follow rules instead of chaos. Indeed, and now you face the same choice we once did. Your species can either transcend physical existence entirely, becoming guardians of cosmic stability like us, or find a way to maintain your humanity while wielding forces that could unravel creation itself." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just become militarily dominant, they had evolved to the point where they faced the same evolutionary choice that had been presented to civilizations since the universe began organizing itself around stable physical laws. Admiral Zaraneth, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, finally spoke. "We choose neither transcendence nor restraint. We choose synthesis." She activated a device that filled the chamber with holographic displays showing humanity's latest project. Vast constructs that weren't weapons or defensive systems, but something unprecedented. "We call them reality anchors. Devices that stabilize local space-time while allowing for controlled alteration. We're creating zones throughout the galaxy where physics remains constant and predictable, connected by corridors, where reality can be modified as needed. A cosmic infrastructure project," Harmony of Spheres observed with what might have been admiration. "You would make yourselves the maintenance engineers of existence itself." "Someone has to," Zaraneth replied simply. "Our defensive development has made us capable of threatening galactic stability. Rather than abandon that capability or transcend beyond physical concern, we choose to use it responsibly. We will ensure that the galaxy remains stable while species develop at their own pace." The proposal that emerged from the historic session established humanity as the unofficial guardians of cosmic stability, a role they accepted not out of ambition, but out of recognition that their unique development had made them uniquely qualified for the responsibility. Trade resumed throughout the galaxy, but now under human oversight that ensured no species would again attempt to acquire reality manipulation. Technology through conquest. The zones of stable physics allowed normal galactic civilization to continue, while the controlled reality corridors enabled necessary infrastructure development under careful supervision. The galaxy had found peace not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the recognition that some species, when pushed beyond their limits, don't break. They evolve into something capable of rewriting the rules entirely. And in quiet moments, when the vast responsibility of maintaining cosmic stability weighed heavily on human consciousness, they remembered their origin as a small blue world that simply wanted to be left alone. That desire for peaceful isolation had, through the galaxy's repeated attempts to deny it, transformed into absolute responsibility for everyone's continued existence. It was, perhaps, the universe's way of ensuring that those with the power to destroy everything would be those who most valued the simple desire to exist in peace. The final message from Earth had been delivered not in words, but in the fundamental restructuring of galactic civilization itself. One more attack had indeed meant annihilation, not of the attackers, but of the old order where might made right, and the weak existed at the sufferance of the strong. In its place stood something new, a galaxy where reality itself had learned to serve those who understood that true strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to protect and preserve. Humanity had kept their promise. The attackers had been annihilated, not in body, but in their ability to threaten others through superior force, and in that annihilation a new cosmos had been born.